Israel has officially agreed to surrender to Hamas in the war in exchange for Hamas returning, at this point, some of the hostages, dead or alive, not clear. Yeah, goal of the war from day one, declared by Netanyahu, was that Hamas will no longer exist. Hamas will be destroyed. Hamas has not been destroyed. Hamas's leadership is, many of Hamas's leaders are dead. Um, Many of Hamas's fighters are dead. But the Palestinian people who gave Hamas, first of all, put Hamas in power and kept them in power, and who are keeping the hostages, they are alive and well. They are still fighting. They were out on the streets of Gaza when the deal was finalized, celebrating like they celebrated on October 7th, because the result is the same, if not worse, in terms of the Palestinian cause, which is the extermination of the Jews. This is a great victory for them. Over 400 Israeli soldiers died in Gaza in the operation and during this war. And one of the things that this surrender by Israel means is that they died for nothing. They did not achieve the goal, and it's not them who did not achieve the goal. It is the government who chose not to achieve the goal, chose not to achieve the goal so that possibly some of the hostages will be brought back alive, chose not to achieve the goal so that those in the rest of the world who don't want Israel to exist at all will have a little bit less, supposedly a little bit less ammunition, and unfortunately chose not to win this war because more as time went on, more and more pressure was put from within Israel to accept all of Hamas's terms and give them the victory. Um, yeah, we've been following this war from day one, from while the attack was going on October 7th. We, on October 9th, did an episode titled Why Israel Can't Win. Unfortunately, the things we said, Israel followed. We said very much, we hope we're wrong. Of course, we were not wrong on what will happen. We were not wrong in our projections of what's going to happen. And we were right in terms of what we said should be done. Israel took the opposite course. Israelis died for nothing, and the Palestinian cause has been, in effect, has been given a victory that should not have been given, and has been given incentive to keep repeating October 7th again and again until there are no more Jews left to kill, as Hamas has promised. Welcome to the Daily Objective. Daniel, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, starting from a bit more fundamental perspective, we as humans have created a society, have come together, have decided that for the society, for a civilized society rather, to function, we need to extract force from human interaction. That basically you cannot use force, you can only deal by mutual consent, hopefully to mutual benefit. And for that reason, we've established the police force, the courts, and the army to basically protect us from also the foreign threats to the citizens, to the people. And when one becomes a soldier, you know, America especially has the culture of thanking the service from the soldiers, for anyone who served, and I think that is something that I almost uniquely see much more in America than in anywhere else, and it is because there is a certain view of these people are protecting all of us. These people are protecting us, and similarly in Israel. Uh, any IDF soldier deserves respect. He is there to protect his country. Um, but when that happens, when when that goes through, when someone is a soldier and then something else is being done than what needs to be done. Basically, if you are an IDF soldier, your goal should be to eliminate the threat towards, basically your family, your citizens, and the people you care for. And the fact that you could be that soldier and your life I mean, you've mentioned more than 400 people died in the Gaza offensive. Uh, uh, I think in total about 850 soldiers died in sort of since October 7th, including October 7th. And you know, the also the reason that there was even ground offensive was not to protect Israelis, was to protect Palestinians, because we could have easily bombed much more of Gaza from the air, which is much more safer towards the soldiers. Any sort of ground operation when you have to go, especially with Gaza, one of the most basically urban sort of areas in the region, when you have to go house by house, when you have to basically, especially with Hamas that is completely embedded in its population, that doesn't have any military infrastructure, basically any sort of point you are at with in Gaza, you have to go to hospitals, you have to go to schools, you have to go to civilian areas, because that's where Hamas is. And that is incredibly risky. And the fact that all of this is being done, again, none of this is protecting Israelis, none of this is protecting the lives of the soldiers. It's all basically for the sake of Palestinians, for the sake, and here we are not even talking about where we've heard a lot that, you know, Hamas is some sort of like terrorist organization that has imposed itself on the population. No, Palestinians have elected Hamas, and even if you say, well, that was a long time ago, well, they not a single time have risen up to Hamas. They supported Hamas throughout this. When the ceasefire deal was announced, they were cheering. They were cheering the fact that they would stay under the occupation of Hamas, because Hamas, according to the deal, is not going anyway. So, you know, if they just couldn't wait to get rid of Hamas, if they just needed a push, why are they largely celebrating? Celebrating with Hamas. We've seen Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad on the streets with the Palestinians celebrating it. And you know, the fact that you could be an IDF soldier and you know, someone who really cares for Israel, who you know, really uh, unfortunately, with Israel, you know, the service is mandatory. But I assume, I know many Israelis actually have returned back to Israel just to return to the IDF, just to basically protect their country. So there have been many who did it voluntarily. And the fact that after you choose to do something like that, basically you choose to fight for your country, um, and then you are basically for the most part basically just trying to protect your enemy, trying to protect Palestinians, trying to, you know, get them the humanitarian aid. It's not only like disappointing or anything like that, it's truly a complete inversion of what the government is supposed to do. It's a complete I mean, it's evil. There's nothing else like that.
Yeah, yeah, and so much of this comes from, again, the desire we've said, and the Palestinians and the wider Arab and wider Muslim world say this all the time. You know, they say we love death more than you love life, but that is that those are the sides fighting here. It's the side of death versus the side of life, and unfortunately, the side of life hasn't fully. Many on the side of life haven't fully thought through what that means. So, you know, the desire to bring back the hostages is obviously that's something you want if you're on the side of life. But putting it into the context of what it means, especially what it means um, in the sense of you know, what is the price being paid? And the price being paid is the security of Israel. It is future hostages. It is future murdered citizens and soldiers. That is the price that Israel has agreed to and has been demanded by many in Israel, which we're gonna talk about on the reality show today. So yeah, unfortunately, you know, when I look at kind of the operations that Israel has done in Gaza. I think Arnon Zamora, you know, who died in the operation to rescue four hostages, a successful operation that brought four hostages home alive. According to the Palestinians, a number of dead Palestinians is in the hundreds, probably a lie. Obviously, doesn't matter if it was in the tens of thousands just for that operation. Great. If that's the price that they have to pay, there's an easier way for them to do it, which is to return the hostages, and then it wouldn't have happened. But in the case of Arnon Zamora, I'd say that's an operation where a soldier dies, and you know, tragic as it is, you understand, like soldiers are there to defend citizens, and sometimes they'll die in that process. Um, and generally in Gaza, if Israel had flattened the place from above, there would be many terrorists left because they're hiding like rats in the tunnels. And those operations to get them in the tunnels might also result in dead Israelis. But no, as you mentioned, the soldiers who died for the most part defending so-called innocent civilians on the Palestinian side from what Israel would have to do if they targeted Hamas where Hamas was. And Hamas played the whole war from day one until now is entirely scripted in a sense by Hamas. They took hostages because they knew Israel would pay a price for them. They hid in hospitals and schools because they know Israel would be careful about targeting such places and would still be blamed by the world for targeting hospitals and schools. Hamas is really, everything they wanted on October 7th, everything we said on this channel from day one of this war has turned out to be the way it played out. And nobody on the Israeli side, nobody on the American side has any excuse to say, well, look, we didn't know, because they knew, because it's not like we have some sort of, divine revelation that told us what's going to happen. It's the study of history and the nature of man that made it possible for us, made it so obvious to us what's going to happen here. So anyway, we'll get there's some interesting comments in the chat, which we'll get to. I want to get to the super chats as well. Christian, thank you for the super chat. Christian says many people, including, for example, Ben Shapiro and Victor Davis Hanson, think that Israel will resume fighting after the deal. I hope they are right. I also hope they're right. I still wouldn't do the deal. Look, Israel is going to release what 1,000 terrorists, including those who already have blood on their hands, and including those who have been unsuccessful in getting blood on their hands, but will be successful maybe in the next attempt. Some of these are being sent to the usual places, Turkey, Qatar. Some of them are being sent to Gaza and the West Bank. What do you think they're going to do in Gaza and the West Bank? Help rebuild it and make it the what Paris of the Middle East? Actually, it kind of is the Paris of the Middle East, but that's a story for another day. What do you expect them to do there? They will be immediately drafted into the Palestinian army of the army that has one goal, which is to exterminate the Jews. So anyway,
Yeah,
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 I will. Yeah, go ahead.
and again, the fact that releasing them to Turkey or somewhere else is viewed as, well, that's we are not giving them back to Gaza. Well, many Hamas members have been trained in Turkey, and they've managed to go from there to Gaza. So and any idea the fact that if they just go away, if they just are not in Gaza, that somehow this will be fixed. I mean, PLO wasn't in the West Bank until the Oslo Accords. It was all over the Middle East, even getting kicked out of many of the countries. But it was still fighting against Israel actively. So, yeah, the fact that releasing them anywhere is going to be a problem. It's not like, you just solve it by getting rid of some of the people.
Yeah. Thank you, Ginger, for the super chat. Ginger says, I'm so, so sorry. This is heartbreaking. Hamas would never have agreed to this if it weren't losing. So angry because this is so irrational. Yeah. And look, it's happened in the past. This one, October 7th, was a bigger attack than previous ones by Hamas that led to operations in Gaza, but the principle is the same. Hamas attacks, Israel defends itself, fights back a little bit. The world uses this as an example to make the case for Palestinianism, i.e., the destruction of Israel. And then there's some sort of ceasefire. Often there's a ceasefire, Hamas violates it. There's a little bit of fighting. Eventually, there's a ceasefire that Hamas doesn't violate until it violates it later down the road. So yeah, they're losing in a sense, but they're not actually losing. They're losing in the sense that they had more of their terrorists die than IDF soldiers died. And but that's not a loss for them. That's something that they knew from the start, and they said from the start, th this
It's
is
it's just the price of business, and
yeah.
business being trying to kill as many Israelis as you can. You'll lose some of your members, but you don't care.
Yeah, and again, the death of Palestinians is something, especially if it's not clearly, visibly terrorists, but especially if it's children or women, or you can tell people it's women and children, is something Hamas wants and celebrates. This is what Hamas wants because the useful idiots in the West will say, "Look, Israel is killing women and children," when Hamas is hiding behind them. So yeah. We look at this. We look at this as if Hamas militarily is worse off, so maybe they're losing. But no, in essence, this is a Hamas victory through and through. Thank you, Bonnie, for the super chat. There were some comments in the chat that I wanted to address. There's one, I don't know what exactly this person was getting at, but it was interestingly worded. If the Jews don't want to kill their enemy, why are you living in their land? Which the reason I'm reading this is just because if I understand this correctly, and even if it's not, it could be understood as what kind of one of the main pieces of Palestinian propaganda worldwide is, which is, Jews are stealing the land, therefore the Palestinians have the right to kill them. It's more often in the kind of more those who attempt to sound more reasonable will say this about settlers. Will say this about Jews living in Judea and Samaria on the West Bank over the Jordan River, and in the past Jews who lived in the Gaza Strip. They're settlers. They're living on their land, so Palestinians are defending themselves by killing them. Of course, most of the movement worldwide, even most of the movement in the West now refers in that way also to the people in the Nova Music Festival and to the people in the kibbutzim. So but yeah, that is back to the point of one side is the side of life, one side is the side of death. Um, the problem is that Jews live. That is the problem. That is the problem. That Jews live in a certain place where within a certain distance there are also Arabs. I mean, look, this argument is made even in the West, is made by white supremacists who say, "What are black people doing here? Why don't they go back to Africa?" For some reason, this despicable argument kind of is considered legitimate in the West when it comes to Jews, but no, it's not legitimate. The same person later on said something about they should go back to Europe. Of course, the go back to Europe is very, very specific. Europe is where Jews were slaughtered recently enough that this means, and we know what you mean by it when you say it without you actually fully saying it. By the way, they could also say go back to where most Israeli Jews are descendants of, which is Arab countries. They're not saying that, but what happened to Jews in Europe will happen to Jews in Arab countries if they go back there. So yeah, everybody who says Jews should go back to means the same thing that white supremacists mean when they say black people should go back to Africa, or worse.
Yeah, I mean, and Arabs should go back to Arabia. I mean, that sort of idea is completely like I'm trying to think of not a bad word. It's really dumb. Let's just say that. Because again, people at the very least, people migrate. People move around, and the purpose again, when you say something is their land or this is their land, well, that implies ownership. That implies that they have rights. They have property rights to specific things in that region. But rights are the goal of rights is it should be positive, it should be to build something, it should be to create something. If the only thing that they are using sort of their rights is to oppress their people, is to attack every single almost every single country they can in the region, but at the very least, all Israelis, not just Jews, all Israelis, all Arabs living in Israel, just trying to kill and destroy as many things and as many people as possible. Why? Why would you ever want to sanction any of that? Why would you ever want to be behind that, saying, even if you could somehow justify that, Jews or sort of the first Zionists coming into uh, basically the region as being problematic, they have respect for property rights. They build, they create, they are productive. While Palestinians on the other side are not doing anything with any of their land. With they don't prosper. I think I recently saw. I think. I think it was Neil deGrasse Tyson who said two places you can tell apart. Basically, if you look at the Earth from outside, you cannot tell any sort of country borders. But few borders you can tell apart is North Korea and South Korea, and Israel and the rest of Middle East, because Israel has managed to irrigate deserts. Basically, Israel has managed to create green out of the desert, while the rest of the region doesn't even understand the technology that allowed that to happen. And the fact that you would have, like I've recently seen on Piers Morgan interview, I think Piers said something like he wants to see Hamas gone, even if this deal goes through, which I was amazed to see here almost. But the other person on the panel was saying something like, "Well, I don't care. I'm not a Palestinian. I'm not gonna tell Palestinians who they should like put in power." And the fact that there is no expectations of the Palestinians. They can kill each other and it's okay. No one has any demands for them as long as, it's their land. They can do whatever they want. They can oppress their women, they can oppress their own people. And that's just accepted.
Yeah, this is one Piers Morgan video that I didn't see, but this whole argument of I don't care who the Palestinians vote for. Well, the thing is, it's none of your business what people do in other countries until they say, well, in a sense, as a human being, I'd say it is your business. If another in another place the government oppresses its own people, you should care about it, at least as a human being. But if whoever other people elect say our only goal is to exterminate you, then yes, that's what matters. And this has been, again, remember, it's not Hamas. It's not that Hamas narrowly won an election against a side that said let's have peace. It was 100% of the votes went for parties that wanted to exterminate the Jews, and the one that was more consistent on it won. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, just quickly on that, by the time you get to the point where you have like a terrorist groups on your like political, yeah, when it's like one of the major political parties, it's rare that in such a systems you have like a really great party and a really bad party. It's usually they are both like when it came to the 30s and the Nazis, the only alternative solution was like the communists, because by the time you get to that amount of populism, once you get to that amount of statism, there is really no alternative. Sort of everything you can have, the whole culture is sort of moving towards these ideas. So once you have Hamas there, yeah, Fatah, it wasn't like this beacon of liberty and westernization.
yeah. Okay, I wanted to just quickly go back to Christian Super Chat about the idea that Israel will resume fighting. And yeah, as I mentioned, historically, it is Hamas that does that. If Israel actually does that, that's a very nice thing. I don't think that's going to happen, and we might talk about this on a show in the coming days. But it looks like maybe the kind of more so-called right-wing elements of Netanyahu's government are going to quit. And of course, if it's only Ben Gvir, he's fine. If it's Ben Gvir and Smotrich, he's not fine in the sense that he doesn't have a majority in the Israeli parliament, the Knesset. But the left, specifically Yair Lapid, said we will give you whatever safety net you need, which is interesting because Yair Lapid's entire political career for the past decade or so has been we have to get rid of Netanyahu. That's the only thing that matters in Israeli politics. But if Netanyahu is pro Hamas enough and needs our help, we're going to make sure he stays. And of course, this is the kind of ally you want about as much as you want to have a deal. You want to have a deal with the actual enemy in a war because that is what they are asking of you. This is what the price of the Lapid safety net is. It's keep doing whatever Hamas says and we'll keep you in power. And yeah, I look, I don't like the so-called right-wing people in Netanyahu's government, and I think the fact that they've been sitting there in a government that has been giving so-called humanitarian aid to the enemy at a time of war and basically keeping them alive and keeping them fighting. This is Ben Gvir. Ben Gvir, this is on you. You have been, I know he's not watching because it's a Sabbath, but this is on you. You are responsible for Palestinians continuing to fight, continuing to hold the hostages, killing more hostages. You are in government. You could have done this before. And this is the moment where you're so anyway, so long rant, the goal of which the end of which is basically, look, if Israel resumes fighting, I still think it's going to be something that has been damaged by this. And remember, this is just the first phase of this is like over a month, and another really weird thing. You're agreeing to a deal, the only goal of which from Israel's side is to bring back the hostages, and uh, very few of the hostages are well, not very few, but very few of the hostages are immediately released, and the deal you're agreeing to keeps even the ones that are released long enough in Gaza that bad things can happen. So anyway, parting thoughts?
Uh, yeah, not much. I mean, I'll mention about the Ben Gvir point. I think I've read somewhere that apparently in the past he has stopped many deals because it's important to remember the uh, Netanyahu's coalition used to be much smaller before. I think who was it? Benny Gantz who came back. I'm trying to remember. But basically, so he had the full power to basically, he was like threatening every time because every time he threatened to leave, the coalition would have fell apart. But I was saying basically from the start that if there is like an actual deal on the table, almost the right doesn't even matter because the left will jump in as soon as they can to basically put any sort of deal through, and which is what we see happening right now. So while and it's also really disappointing that we have to rely on, let's say, not the sort of best characters in politics when it comes to anything else than fighting a war. Uh, but yeah.
Yeah, I see one of the trolls in the chat is once again saying stuff about Palestinian suffering. Look, we see the images that they themselves put online of them celebrating in the streets. They are not suffering. They have won the war. And the problem is that they're not suffering. Because if the people in Gaza had been suffering for a few weeks in October, maybe November of 2023, the war would have been over because they would either have risen up against Hamas or they would have died and there would have been no reason to fight, both of which are perfectly acceptable and legitimate ways for Israel to have handled it. And of course, this, unfortunately, is very much not a legitimate reason for way for Israel to have handled it. The reason Israel has gone this way, like you mentioned, is very much in large part due to uh, inner Israeli politics, and that's what we're going to talk about on the reality show, which follows this show immediately. We're going to talk about Israelis for Hamas. That starts in a couple of minutes. Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll see you on the reality show in a couple of minutes.